So my name is Petter. As was mentioned, I've written a book on performance when it comes to Bubble. I've also written a book on security when it comes to Bubble. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different, but first I want to say one thing, is that I've been part of the no-code community for about 10 years, and the no-code community has kind of merged into an AI vibe coding kind of hybrid. And I just have to say that this community is just the most awesome community on the planet. I've never seen such positivity and encouragement, and I've seen, you know, a 20-year-old person having an idea, turning it into an app, and then selling it 5 years later for $5 million. So this industry is just awesome, and I just want to remind everyone that 10 years ago, this was not possible at all. So things have really changed. So the topic of today is, I call it smoke and mirrors. You're going to understand that in a second. I want to talk about why user-perceived performance is the only performance that matters. We can probably look quickly into this. So I've been bubbling since 2016. It's making me feel a little bit old that this is almost 10 years ago. As I said, I've written 2 books. I recently launched a YouTube channel. I'm the lead writer of the official Bubble documentation, so I do day-to-day work keeping that up to date. So if you're unhappy with anything, let me know. And I help design Bubble's official certification program. So if you've taken the certification, I was one of the designers of that. Okay, so let's first start with a definition of what performance is. So most of you have kind of an intuitive sense. There could be different kinds of definitions for this. But for the purpose of this presentation, I think performance is just the time it takes from you start a process like clicking a button until the process is done, as measured in milliseconds. So right, you could be loading a page, which means you send a request from a device to the server, and the server returns something, and that takes some time, right? So let's say 1.8 seconds, like in this example. You could also be storing something in the database, writing something from a form. That means, again, your device is sending data from that device to the server stores the data, sends a confirmation back, and that could take something like 350 milliseconds. And it all depends on the complexity of what you're building. But this is the kind of performance I'm talking about. But what I would encourage you to see, and if you're a UX designer, you will know this, but if you're not, this will maybe be new to you, is that you have actual performance, which is, again, the time it takes for a process to go from start to finish. But then you have perceived performance, which is how fast the app feels and shaped by what the user actually sees on the screen. And I would argue that perceived performance is the only thing that matters, because you'll recognize one thing in this image is that on this side, I have a microchip, which is the processing unit that does the work for you. But in this one, I have a person, which is your user. And your job is not to make the microchip happy. Your job is to make the user happy, which is why perceived performance is so important. And I would like to use a metaphor for this, which may seem a bit tacky. I would like to say that you are a magician. And this may sound like I'm just trying to get your attention, but it's actually a pretty spot-on analogy in my view, because what does a magician do? Well, they work really fast, right? They train their hands and they train everything that they do to do it really fast so that you are not able to see what they're actually doing to perform their tricks. They're also able to set the stage. When you're in an audience looking at a stage like this, if I was a magician, I would have spent maybe months in preparation preparing the stage for the tricks to work, which makes you not understand the trick. They are experts at diverting attention. So when a magician manages to steal your watch, and I've seen this online, you probably see it on YouTube too, a magician can tell you that they're gonna steal your watch, and then 5 minutes later, they've stolen your watch, and you didn't notice. This is how crazy good they are at diverting your attention. Even if you were aware of what was going to happen, you're still surprised. And they constantly communicate with the audience. They set the expectations, they tell the audience what's gonna happen. They can trick the audience into thinking something would happen and then something else is done. And this is actually pretty similar to what great app designers do. So, of course, they set up their apps to work fast, which means they set up efficient databases and workflows and page size so the app is actually fast. And they design their apps to seem fast. So the app design is centered on UX. So the slow stuff is hidden while they show the fast stuff. They divert attention, just like a magician, when something takes time, they make the effort to make you look at something else while the processing is going on. And they are experts at communicating with their audience. And this is really the topic of the conversation today. And I'd like you to see this presentation not as a tutorial. I'm not trying to teach you, you should do this, A, B, and C. I would like you to see this as more of a mindset of how you should think when you design your apps. So I want to make you aware that you are the stage director, you are the magician, you control the show. I'm going to show you some real example of some tricks that apps use to feel fast, and I'm going to show you not just in Bubble, but across different industries. And I want to encourage you to think creatively and find your own methods to do this. So this is maybe the one point that I want to really drill into you from this presentation. When you're creating an app, you control the attention of your audience, okay? You control the attention of your audience. And this is true not just for a Bubble app, but it's true for a streaming service, it's true for traditional coders who are making apps, it's true for game designers, it's true for LLMs, and of course for app designers. And I'd like you to take a look at this. Everyone has used this. It's ChatGPT, right? And you'll notice one thing, is that there are two ways that ChatGPT could deliver this text. They could deliver it as one big chunk of text, or they could deliver it using a streaming API like this, where it looks like someone is actually typing the text on the other end. And this is not an engineering decision. It's made possible by engineering, but it's not an engineering decision. This is a UX decision. So what this does is that it makes the user patiently wait for the answer, because it gradually appears as the natural flow of a conversation. This is a scene from Game of Thrones. You will notice that the resolution on this is just terrible. This is Tywin Lannister skinning a deer, which is symbolically pretty fitting for this, for those who have watched the show. So this is captured in 144p. It's the lowest resolution that YouTube offers, and probably also for Netflix. But as a user, you probably want to see it in 4K, of course. But the problem is, your connection is not always good enough to download 4K, which requires about 13 to 20 megabytes per second. So what do? Well, from an engineering perspective, they generate a lot of different versions of the same video. So they have this video stored in 144p, which is terrible quality, but they also have it stored in 1080p, which is full HD, and of course in 4K. And the reason they're doing this is, again, to keep your attention, because they could have been doing this. And if you've been on the internet for a while, this is how they used to do it, right? Streaming sites were a pain to look at, because they would constantly tell you that, yeah, we're buffering. You have to wait for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and 4K 10 years ago might have given you a 10 to 15 second wait. But instead, they're choosing to show you a low resolution version of the video because it keeps your attention on the screen. So 80% of users, instead of walking away from their TV, they keep watching, they accept the low resolution. And as all of you know, because all of you have used HBO and Netflix, after a few seconds, if your connection is fast enough, it just instantly switches to 4K, right? So we accept the fact that there's low resolution because it switches as soon as it's available. Now look at this from, okay, this is not working, I can see. Who here have played Elden Ring? Some of you. Okay, so Elden Ring is an open world game. It's also a game that I would have made much more YouTube videos if this game didn't exist, because I spent way too much time in it. Anyway, what this animation was supposed to show is that in Elden Ring, and you will recognize this if you played it, there is a place in the map, and this is an open world, where you can take an elevator which takes you down to the underworld of this open world. And this is a really long elevator ride. It takes about a minute to start the elevator ride. You're just standing there, nothing is happening, and then you end up in this amazing looking underworld. And what's really going on here is that, yes, that elevator ride of course shows you how deep the world is going, but also while you're riding this elevator, they're actually loading the map, right? So again, instead of showing you a buffering screen or a loading screen, they're actually just forcing you to stay in the elevator. You're still in the game, you can move around, you can do whatever you want. It's actually a pretty boring elevator ride, but still it keeps your attention on the screen. You don't walk away, you don't turn off your PlayStation. And the same thing is happening here. Some of you may have played Bloodborne, and if you have played Bloodborne, this animation here will give you high blood pressure. Again, look at the slowness of this door opening. It takes like 5 seconds to open door. And again, inside of this door is a boss fight with an introductory animation. And again, they're spending some time loading whatever is inside of this door. That's why the door is slow to open, but you don't think about that. It just feels like they're building suspense, right? So this is not a bubble or app problem. It's used all across industries. So great UX designers, they use all sorts of tricks to make their apps seem faster than it is. And it's all about attention, psychology, and expectations. So we have two things here, and I'd like to point out who is responsible for what. So we have actual performance, milliseconds, as we discussed. This is an engineering job. Setting up an app that performs queries, workflows, and other stuff fast. That's, of course, a big part of it. You want a fast app. But the other side are UX decisions, making your users happy even when things take time. And perceived performance, in my view, is about 4 points. So the first point is about actually creating fast apps. Of course, if you have a fast app, there's no need to manipulate or use any magic tricks. It's already fast. The second is about hiding the processing that you're doing. When and where does it happen? If you're a magician, does it happen on stage so that everyone can see your trick? Or do you do it backstage with assistants to hide it away from your audience? Thirdly, diverting attention. Are you performing a trick? Divert attention elsewhere. Finally, communicate with your audience. Keep your users informed, and your users will actually accept more than you think. So the first question, I'm not going to answer in full in this. I'm going to go to it in a little bit of detail. You can read my book if you'd like to learn more about how to create fast apps. But if everything is in your app is already fast, it's kind of like this guy. Like, he's not performing any tricks. He's actually fast. There's no need to do any magic tricks to make him seem faster than he is. But secondly, let's look at what makes an app fast. So database structure, you need an efficient database structure with low data weight, privacy rules set up. You can use satellite data types for unstructured heavy data. You need to think about your download size, which is the total size of your page. If you have thousands of workflows, your code base will be bigger. It will take a longer time to download. Images can be heavy. Keep them small, compress them, make sure that they're not bigger than they used to be. Limit the number of fonts. All of these are things that you can do to keep the initial download size smaller. Of course, optimize your workflows. You can move workflows to the back end and not have them all on the same page. Keep them efficient. Keep users updated while it's processing. And of course, fast searches. If you use privacy rules and constraints and avoid heavy client-side filtering, your searches will be faster. I'd love to go into more detail, but that's not the topic of discussion today, because we're going to move on to the second point, which is about hiding processing. So let's look at this. This is a typical kind of CRM dashboard. It's something that probably everyone has seen and used in some sort, maybe built in your life. And this is a typical, pretty data-heavy dashboard. There's a lot of data and analytics, and there could be thousands of customers and products, stuff like that, which is taxing on the database. So let's look at this left side menu here. So this suggests something, right? It suggests that this is probably a single-page application. You have a dashboard with analytics, you have a list of customers, you have products, you have payments, invoices, transactions. So let's ask some questions related to this menu. First of all, is this a single-page app or is it a multi-page app? So a single-page app will be slower to load the initial page because there's more data and more code to load. But when it's done loading, it will run faster because everything is loaded. Second question is, when do I load the data? Do I load it all on page load or as the user navigates? Because if you go back to this slide, we could be loading the customers, the products, the payments on page load, or we could be loading it when the user clicks these, right? So we can make decisions like these to kind of control when the data load happens. And thirdly, can I predict user actions? Like if you have statistics in your app, you can know which pages are the most used. For example, if I'm a salesperson, do I need to see this dashboard every time I log in? Is this the first thing I should see? Maybe not. Maybe I'm more interested in seeing the actual prospects that I'm currently working on, which means if you're showing this first, not only are you wasting their time, but you're spending a lot of server resources aggregating all this data, and the first thing that he does is to click the customer tab, right? Okay, so let's look at single page versus multi-page apps. Single page, in my view, is usually better because it takes a little more time to load the initial page, but when it is loaded, the app is just blazingly fast because all the data is available on the user's device already. Also, it's harder to maintain a consistent user experience over multiple pages. It also means that your app remembers stuff. So if you download a list of users and a list of products, and then you navigate to a different page, all that is forgotten. If you go back to the dashboard, you have to reload that data. So keeping it within a single page application means that a lot of data is already stored on the user's device and doesn't need to be downloaded again. So that's another upside of single page apps. Also, it will remember things like custom states, filled out input fields. As soon as you leave the page, these are all forgotten, right? So it's easier to store temporary information if you keep it all within a single page application. You get away with just having one loading screen. If you use a multi-page app, you have to have potentially a loading screen or at least some loading time for every page. Even if you go back and forth between pages, the browser doesn't remember much. It just goes back and forth, needs to download the same data again and again. And I'd like you also to think about low value and high value payloads, and you can do that in a single page application. So like we saw in the example of the dashboard, if your users are not using these statistics on a regular basis, if they're actually more interested in seeing their client list, I would say that the statistics dashboard is a low value payload. It's not worth loading. So you might think about whether this is supposed to be your first start screen or whether you can load that information when it's needed, given user interaction. High value payloads are things that every user has need of. So as a salesperson, I may always have the need to see the list of my clients, which means, yes, I should load that on page load. Second question, when do I load the data? So landing weight is what I call kind of the total weight of the page that you're downloading, right? And this consists of the code base, as I mentioned, and it also consists of database searches. So let's take an example if you're running a newspaper site or a blog site. This contains a lot of unstructured data, lengthy articles, right? And if you're downloading millions of those, you could actually be downloading several megabytes of data every time you load the page from the database. So you can decide on the size and the complexity of what you show first, your app's opening load. Loading all at once gives you a longer initial page load, but after that, the app is extremely snappy. So it maximizes workload use, but it makes up for it in terms of user experience. So on the dashboard that we were looking at, you could set up hidden repeating groups or use reusable elements with custom properties to load a list of things long before they're needed. And when users navigate the single page application, it will instantly be there because it's already loaded. You could choose to load as users navigate. And this, again, has to do with low and high value payloads. So if you know that users are often looking at their client list, this is definitely something that you should be loading when the page loads. But if they rarely look at the statistics dashboard, maybe you shouldn't load that every time the page loads. Maybe you should wait until the user tells you to load it by navigating in the menu. Also, you can pre-generate data. Again, going back to the statistics dashboard, there's a lot of aggregation going on to create sales statistics, and that is pretty taxing on the server. It consumes workload and it takes time. But you can pre-generate the data in the backend, for example, and setting up a data type like statistics and store the statistics for January 2024. It's all stored after February 1st. January 2024 is no longer relevant. No sales in January will happen after January. So you can store statistical data in your database without having to aggregate and calculate it every time. User roles is also a way that can help you determine what kind of data you need to load. So let's say, again, a sales dashboard. I could be an account manager, or I could be a sales manager. Now, the account manager needs to have access to some specific data, whereas the sales manager may need access to a different kind of data. So based on what kind of user roles you set up, you can decide, okay, this user is a sales manager. He needs access to statistics to track the sales of his team, whereas as a salesperson, it may be more important to load prospects and customers. You can use behavioral data, and this is what I call hot and cold content, which sections are frequently visited and which are not, which can be tailored also on a user basis. And I'll give you another example if you're building a single-page application. So using a dashboard, looking at clients, looking at products, these are all things that people do on a day-to-day basis. But updating your own user settings, like changing your username or adding a profile photo, that's usually something that you do once, right? You don't visit that page that often. So that's something you can offload to a different page. In that page, I wouldn't mind having a multi-page setup. So keep in mind, hot and cold content. Content that is rarely visited shouldn't be part of your single-page application because it's not needed. Also, you can track live behavior, like when someone clicks something, they hover something, or they type something into an input field. All of these are signs that a user is preparing to see some data or start some processing, which you can use to predict user actions. So let's look at an example of something that I call process spreading. So let's say you have a form that goes through 3 steps. So you have the first step is very lightweight. I've illustrated this with a feather. It doesn't require much processing. Step 2 is also very lightweight. Let's say you're filling out further details in a form. But step 3, as you see, is more heavy. This is where the heavy processing happens. And what I'd like to encourage you to try to do is to actually start the processing on step 2. Because on step 1, you're not sure if the user is going to go through all steps. But if they reach step 2, they're pretty likely to reach step 3. And that means you can start the processing earlier. And I'll show you a relevant example of this. So here we have a simple setup. These would not be visible on the screen. They would be visible one by one in a real app, and they would, of course, have some content in them. In step 1, they're filling out some basic information. No processing is required. All the input is stored in the input fields. In step 2, again, no processing required. We're just asking the user for information. But in step 3, when the user clicks finish, let's say we're starting a 30-second process of generating a lot of data, accessing APIs, something like that. Let's say we're performing a slow search, for example, on step 3. We're searching for a lot of data. What you can do in this example is, here I've set up, this is a reusable element. It's 1 by 1 pixel wide. The user can't see it. It has a condition on it. I'll show it in more detail, I think. Yeah. So it has a condition. This is the name of the page, process spreading. Step is a custom state. Step is a number, and step is 2, which means the user has reached stage 2 of the process. At that point, we start searching for the products. And I've added filtered here just to show that this is a complex and time-consuming search. So again, going back to this one, this hidden reusable element starts searching for these products already on step 2, which means that when the user reaches step 3 and clicks finish, the search is already done. The user doesn't have to wait 5 seconds because the job is already done. Okay, so let's look at predictive processing. That's starting a process by predicting user behavior. Let's go back to the menu again. And let's say that the user wants to click this. They want to click into products and look at this. So at some point, their mouse is going to hover over this group, which contains this text and this icon. Already at that point, you can start to preload the data that is needed, because it will take the user a few milliseconds from hovering that group until they click it, which means you can use those milliseconds to start loading data. Again, I'm using a reusable element with a custom property which performs the search query, and the result is that the new page section has already started loading before the user clicks, because we know that they're going to click it. So you can predict user behavior using methods like these. Okay, so let's look at diverting attention. So again, going back to the magician, if they're performing a magic trick, they will do all sorts of things to make you look elsewhere while they're performing their magic. So diverting attention means you give your users something to look at. Like the basic thing is a loading bar. Like you could be showing a blank page. A loading bar, everyone takes that for granted, but it's also a UX decision, right? You could be looking at a blank page. If that took 30 seconds, your users would think that your app has crashed and they would close the tab. But a loading bar shows that something is happened. You can use a smooth animation. You can use a fun fact or a quote, just show them something to look at. You can show interesting images. You can, encourage them to play a mini game while the processing is going on. Or you could give them something to do. Let's say you're creating a user profile. You could ask them while the profile is being generated to fill out a form, to complete some onboarding tutorial or steps, fill out a microsurvey. They could be inviting teammates to their team. They could upload their profile photo. There's lots of things you can do to divert their attention while some slow processing is going on. So in this case, let's say I sign up with a username, an email, and a password, and let's assume that this sign up takes some time. Let's say it takes 30 seconds. Again, I can show a loading screen or animation. I can show an introduction video, welcome to my health app. I could have them read and agree to terms and conditions while this processing is going on. I could have them fill out their dietary preferences in this case, invite other users, show them an interactive demo, user testimonials. Just keep users distracted whenever something takes time. This is from Mobbin, which is a great platform for finding ideas for UX. This is what you'll see while their user account is being set up. Because you register, it takes some time to set the account up, and while that is happening, they're showing you this. And this is a smooth, cool animation. You're looking at it for a few seconds. Maybe you start to invite some friends. By the point you click later, the process is done. But you diverted their attention in the meantime. Again, this is something we're so used to. Like Bolt and Uber, they all use these interactive maps. Again, I'd like to point out that this is a brilliant UX decision because it could have been all text-based. They could have just been telling you that, yes, we can get you a car. It's 10 minutes away. But by doing it this way, not only is it just visually very appealing to see where the car actually is, but you can see the car moving closer to you. And they'll also tell you things like, this driver is finishing another ride and he'll get to you as soon as he's done, which is just useful information which makes users accept that, okay, it's going to take 12 minutes before he's here. I accept that. I understand. He has to complete his ride. Again, these are UX decisions. Here we have, again, an account being set up. Again, we can ask the user to complete onboarding, set up your basics, start some tutorial, set up global payroll, and you can kind of encourage the user to get the most out of this product. You can kind of say, if you fill out this form, this product will work better for you, all while some heavy processing is going on. And this, again, could have been a boring loading screen. For those who've used Wise, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get this animation. When you send money with Wise, it takes some time. There are a lot of API calls, bank security, stuff like that. So sending money actually takes a little bit of time. This animation is so smooth that I actually ended up just looking at the screen, even though I didn't have to. It took like 10 seconds. I was just looking because the animation is just so smooth. It just shows you how the money goes from one user to the other. Again, keeping me occupied while it's all going on. So again, the lesson here is that you control the attention of your audience. Some processing takes time. There's just no getting around it, but you have a chance to hide it. Finally, communicate. Right? These three scenarios. You have a late public transport, you lost your luggage at the airport, you're in the doctor waiting room. These are all frustrating situations. They could all be made better if you give them information. We will be driving in 5 minutes, we're just waiting for the signal. We know where your luggage is, it will be delivered to your hotel 1 hour after you arrive. The doctor will see you in 25 minutes because he's running a little bit late. This information is what people need, and it makes the situation much more bearable. And again, some things just take time, but by communicating things, people will understand. You can actually tell them. They're more patient than you think. So let's look at a few quick examples. Let's say there's a 5-second wait. Users need to wait a short while before a process finishes. So here are things you can do. A smooth loading animation. You could give them a time estimate. This may take a few seconds. People will understand. You could ask for permissions like this one is doing. Do you allow us to use your location? This is also something that you can do while you're diverting their attention. And let's say a 5-minute wait is something that most users would find unacceptable. It's too long. They will close the app and be frustrated. So again, on Airbnb, they'll ask you to fill out a lot of details while the account is being set up. You can do something like this where a photo upload, let's say there are a few gigabytes of data, it will take some time. You can tell users that, yeah, we're uploading this, but you can still use the app, right? You don't have to close the app down entirely while that processing is going on. And also just be patient, be honest and state the importance, right? In this cryptocurrency app, it's going through different steps, keeping the user updated on what's going on all the way. So just be honest in your communication. And let's say there's a 1-hour waiting time. If you have 10 million records in your database, you need to make changes to it. 1 hour is not unrealistic. It could take that time. And showing a loading screen would just be unbearable. People would close the app. Maybe that would even stop the process. Tell them, this process may take up to an hour. We'll email you when it's ready. Have a cup of coffee in the meantime. Make it lightweight. As long as people know how long it takes, they're going to accept it. Be honest. Give them a break. They'll understand. So communication builds patience, trust, and it sets clear expectations. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to say something, right? A blank screen is the worst thing you could have. Just saying something is a lot better than saying nothing. Be honest. If a process takes an hour, say that it takes an hour. Send them an email afterwards. If you can, show them progress, right? We're getting closer to the finish line. And keep it fun and lightweight. You know, as in the previous example, ask them to have a cup of coffee if something takes 5 minutes. Maybe they'll actually do that. Okay, so perceived performance is all about creating fast apps, hiding the processing, diverting attention, and communicating with your audience. This is not an engineering job. It's a UX decision that you can make to make your users happy. And that's it.